I scrub Craig's final live stream frame by frame. Headphones on, city noise pushed out. Most people saw fear. I saw geometry. The square and compass sitting over his shoulder looked wrong by 2 degrees, maybe 3. It wasn't the mass-market decal every startup bro slaps on a whiskey shelf. This angle was precise, like someone adjusted it to say something quietly. I pull the raw file and dig into the metadata. Nothing obvious. Resolution, bitrate, a GPS ghost that says he's somewhere he shouldn't be. Downtown, near the river, in a building that used to belong to the oldest bank in the city, before mixed use turned vaults into yoga studios. But then there's the oddity. A frame-embedded checksum, not the kind YouTube slaps on uploads. This one resolves to a watermark used by a legacy clearinghouse. Think old money, old stamps, and a habit of branding everything they touched. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. A moderator in Lagos flags the clip for legal hold, then deletes it from the public feed. He pings me privately, says he's seen overlays appear midstream before, but never one tied to a bank watermark. 20 minutes later, his admin dashboard logs out by itself. He'll regret helping me. He helps anyway. If this clip's been tampered with, someone with infrastructure did it live, not in post. That means access to Craig's stream at Uplink. Who can sit between a CEO and his audience without leaving fingerprints? Not your average troll farm. Not a disgruntled intern. Someone with a note to call in. I freeze the shot where Craig mutters, "The debt is due." His pupils don't track the lens. They track a point left of the frame. Reflections in the glass cabinet behind him. Candles, smoke, a brass rosette on the floor like a compass rose rendered in tile. I adjust gamma and lift edges. The emblem's right angle is offset. Offsets can mean coordinates if you know the room they're signaling. I don't. Not yet. The checksum string nags me. I cross-reference the pattern against leaked manuals from the clearinghouse era. One hit, a watermark used on vault ledgers to authenticate night deposits. The bank that isn't a bank comes back into focus. It's been a foundation since 2012. Registered to a nest of shell companies with naming conventions pulled from maritime charts, Sounder, Keel, Lantern Reef. They gave out grants for literacy and disaster relief. They also leased the top floors to philanthropic partners. Tenancy records, after 2012, scrubbed to polite emptiness. I go to the building. The facade still carries columns heavy enough to hold secrets. The lobby smells like product launch and old stone. Co-working neon meets marble names etched a century ago. Elevators ding soft. The panel looks ordinary until you notice the wear pattern isn't. A circular polish no one's finger makes by accident sits between 12 and 14, where a button shouldn't be. I photograph the brass and zoom in. The swirl lines aren't swirl lines. They're tiny compass points chased into the metal, smoothed by time. The security guard's badge flashes when he leans. I catch the reflection, nightly temple rounds. Maybe an inside joke. Maybe a schedule you don't joke about. He asks who I'm here to see. I say I'm delivering a program for the gala. A charity event called Friends of the Foundation is on every calendar that matters this week. He shrugs. Charity always gets a pass. Back at my desk, I replay the Lagos mod's message. He restored the clip locally and ran a diff against the public cache. The emblem overlay? Not added later. Activated as the stream went live. That's a signal, not decoration. Craig wasn't alone in that room. He was speaking to someone who could read a shift in an ancient logo and understand coordinates, timing, obligation. The phrase, "the debt is due," wasn't melodrama. It was a status update to people who live by ledgers. I pull up Craig's last 6 months. Public brawls with regulators. A whistleblower rumor eating the edges of his company's valuation. He stopped tweeting the day before the stream. He canceled a keynote with a vague, personal matter. His PAC spent heavily on one city race. A clean slate reformer, ex-coder, young enough to look like the future, old enough to know where doors are. The candidate's donor disclosures list Friends of the Foundation as an event host. A circle tightens. At 2 a.m., the building's event page updates. Annual Giving Gala, by invitation. I request credentials in a fake donor's name borrowed from a startup's sponsor role. 10 minutes later, an email arrives. "We're delighted you'll join us." Delight is a strong word. I check the attachment. It's a program proof. The keynote quote on page 2 is from Craig Mason. He's missing, but his words are punctual. The square and compass in the header? The same variant. The offset is identical. The trail of symbols isn't myth. It's a breadcrumb system. And somebody wants me to follow it, or they're too confident to care that I am. The trail of symbols isn't myth. It's a breadcrumb system. And somebody wants me to follow it, or they're too confident to care that I am. Either way, I circle tomorrow on my wall calendar and pack my camera, a spare battery, and a reason to keep going when doors start closing. By daylight, the building performs respectability. Doric columns, bronze lamps, a plaque that thanks donors for literacy drives and flood relief. But every story it tells in public has a shadow running under it. In the archives, the bank's name shows up in colonial ledgers when ships left with cocoa and returned with ledgers thicker than conscience. Vaults were cut into the bedrock, keyed to a numbering system that still shows up in fire drill maps. Then 2012 arrives, and the bank dissolves into a foundation, the kind of word that reassures. The vault drawings don't disappear. They get relabeled as heritage storage. Tenancy records after that year look like a polite shrug. The management company lists floors by square feet, not names. Payment flows into shells with maritime names: Sounder Holdings, Keel Partners, Lantern Reef Trust. Each files annual paperwork on time, each donates to scholarships that photograph well. The pattern is soothing if you don't touch it. Touch it, and you feel the seam. I walk the perimeter. What used to be armored windows now hold artisanal coffee and app demo screens. But the stone remembers. On the east side, a narrow service door is painted the same gray as nothing. A camera watches the alley like a blink that never completes. I keep moving, come back through the main entrance where the marble floor still hums with the weight of transactions. The receptionist has the crisp calm of someone used to important names. "Gala check-in?" she asks. I hold up the invitation. She smiles with every tooth. I take the elevator keycard she offers and ride up with founders who practice laughing. The elevator panel is cleaner than it should be. No gum in the seams, no scratches where rings hit. But there's that wear pattern again. A soft halo of polish where a non-existent button might be. I angle my phone and catch the brass at a slant. The supposed swirl is a nest of tiny compasses, each pointing minutely off true north by the same angle I saw in Craig's emblem. I exhale. Somebody's been talking to me in degrees. On the mezzanine, framed photos of community partners hang at precise heights. I recognize one face, the retired statesman who can thread a needle on television. He's younger in the photo, ribbon around his neck, hand on a ceremonial key. The caption reads, "Dedication of the Foundation's Learning Vault." A vault for learning. I make a note. A uniformed guard strolls past, badge angled toward his body. When he leans to scan a door, I catch it in the glass. Nightly Temple Rounds. Maybe it's an old-school name for night shift. Maybe it's not. He holds the door for a caterer, pushing silver domes that smell like saffron and money. I slip my phone into my jacket and follow my nose to the banquet hall. Set crews pin banners to trusses. The dais holds a lectern engraved with the variant emblem if you know to look. My seat marker is a symbol instead of a name. A slender square set askew. A compass leg shortened. The program quotes Craig on civic duty as shared risk. They've got him speaking from the grave to bless the room. I leave the champagne to the suits and drift toward the service corridor. The air turns cooler, stone replacing drywall. You can hear buildings change their minds if you listen. Modern acoustics give way to something thick and older. The elevator bank here is different. Instead of the glossy digital panels upstairs, these are brushed brass with mechanical keys for firemen. Above the keyhole, a plate reads LF. Not lower floor, lodge floor, if you're the kind of person who speaks in euphemisms. I press my hand to the wall and feel a faint vibration. A machine running slow, steady, like a heartbeat set to ceremony. There's a plaque for the Foundation's private museum, open by appointment later this month. The hours don't matter. The sign is a cover story nailed to a locked door. Meanwhile, paper trails refuse to sit still. I pull tenancy PDFs back at my desk and cross-index vendors listed for facility services. One contract repeats across the shelves, a company known for archival climate control. Good for paintings, better for parchment. Another line item, night access rosters, confidential. The invoice codes match the old clearinghouse's watermark pattern, the same family as the checksum in Craig's stream. Separate systems, same route. And then, a small giveaway. The elevator maintenance logs, filed to a public city portal nobody visits, list a recurring error. Auxiliary floor selector. Calibration drift. The trail of symbols isn't myth, it's a breadcrumb system. And somebody wants me to follow it, or they're too confident to care that I am. Either way, I circle tomorrow on my wall calendar and pack my camera, a spare battery, and a reason to keep going when doors start closing. By daylight, the building performs respectability. Doric columns, bronze lamps, a plaque that thanks donors for literacy drives and flood relief. But every story it tells in public has a shadow running under it. In the archives, the bank's name shows up in colonial ledgers when ships left with cocoa and returned with ledgers thicker than conscience. Vaults were cut into the bedrock, keyed to a numbering system that still shows up in fire drill maps. Then 2012 arrives, and the bank dissolves into a foundation, the kind of word that reassures. The vault drawings don't disappear. They get relabeled as heritage storage. Tenancy records after that year look like a polite shrug. The management company lists floors by square feet, not names. Payment flows into shells with maritime names, Sounder Holdings, Keel Partners, Lantern Reef Trust. Each files annual paperwork on time, each donates to scholarships that photograph well. The pattern is soothing if you don't touch it. Touch it, and you feel the seam. I walk the perimeter. What used to be armored windows now hold artisanal coffee and app demo screens. But the stone remembers. On the east side, a narrow service door is painted the same gray as nothing. A camera watches the alley like a blink that never completes. I keep moving, come back through the main entrance where the marble floor still hums with the weight of transactions. The receptionist has the crisp calm of someone used to important names. "Gala check-in?" she asks. I hold up the invitation. She smiles with every tooth. I take the elevator keycard she offers and ride up with founders who practice laughing. The elevator panel is cleaner than it should be. No gum in the seams, no scratches where rings hit. But there's that wear pattern again. A soft halo of polish where a non-existent button might be. I angle my phone and catch the brass at a slant. The supposed swirl is a nest of tiny compasses, each pointing minutely off true north by the same angle I saw in Craig's emblem. I exhale. Somebody's been talking to me in degrees. On the mezzanine, framed photos of community partners hang at precise heights. I recognize one face, the retired statesman who can thread a needle on television. He's younger in the photo, ribbon around his neck, hand on a ceremonial key. The caption reads, "Dedication of the Foundation's Learning Vault." A vault for learning. I make a note. A uniformed guard strolls past, badge angled toward his body. When he leans to scan a door, I catch it in the glass. Nightly Temple Rounds. Maybe it's an old-school name for night shift. Maybe it's not. He holds the door for a caterer, pushing silver domes that smell like saffron and money. I slip my phone into my jacket and follow my nose to the banquet hall. Set crews pin banners to trusses. The dais holds a lectern engraved with the variant emblem if you know to look. My seat marker is a symbol instead of a name. A slender square set askew. A compass leg shortened. The program quotes Craig on civic duty as shared risk. They've got him speaking from the grave to bless the room. I leave the champagne to the suits and drift toward the service corridor. The air turns cooler. Stone replacing drywall. You can hear buildings change their minds if you listen. Modern acoustics give way to something thick and older. The elevator bank here is different. Instead of the glossy digital panels upstairs, these are brushed brass with mechanical keys for firemen. Above the keyhole, a plate reads LF. Not lower floor, lodge floor, if you're the kind of person who speaks in euphemisms. I press my hand to the wall and feel a faint vibration. A machine running slow, steady, like a heartbeat set to ceremony. There's a plaque for the Foundation's private museum, open by appointment later this month. The hours don't matter. The sign is a cover story nailed to a locked door. Meanwhile, paper trails refuse to sit still. I pull tenancy PDFs back at my desk and cross-index vendors listed for facility services. One contract repeats across the shelves, a company known for archival climate control. Good for paintings, better for parchment. Another line item, night access rosters, confidential. The invoice codes match the old clearinghouse's watermark pattern, the same family as the checksum in Craig's stream. Separate systems, same route. And then, a small giveaway. The elevator maintenance logs, filed to a public city portal nobody visits, list a recurring error. Auxiliary floor selector. Calibration drift. I return to the lobby just before dusk to watch shift change. The guard with the nightly Temple Rounds badge hands off to a woman with the same badge, the same calm. They talk about routes and keys like any workplace. She mentions a nave when she means a hallway. He laughs and corrects himself. Old habits die in the open if no one thinks the words matter. At the end of the hall, a cleaning cart blocks a side door. A wedge holds it open. From inside wafts the faintest trace of incense, not the perfumed kind from expensive shops, but something resinous, old. I make a simple choice. I step through, 1 foot inside the building the public sees, 1 foot in the one it hides. The hall glows like a polished promise. Crystal, linen, a stage washed in foundation blue. But when I step to the check-in, There's no printer chattering names into badges. The attendant slides me a rectangle of ivory card with a symbol, not letters. A square tilted off axis, a compass leg shortened. I ask if I can correct a misspelling. She smiles. We don't do names tonight. Inside, tables wear centerpieces of brass rosettes and beeswax tapers. The program at each place quotes Craig Mason on shared risk and civic courage, attributed to a keynote that never happened. My nameplate is another symbol, same degree of offset I tracked in the clip. The emblems aren't decoration. They're seating charts that sort by allegiance. I drift to the buffet. The menu reads like cuisine until you listen for code. First course, apricot tartlet, almond, saffron, degree 1. Second, sea bass with fennel, degree 7th. Final, sorbet trio, degree XT3. The chef stands with hands on hips, Ghanaian accent warm and tired. I ask if the degrees mean spice levels. He laughs. If they say so. He lowers his voice. They sent me this list with numbers and little tools. I cook. They eat. After tonight, I go back to Accra and forget all of it. He grins, but his eyes stay on the floor plan taped to the kitchen door. Some lines are highlighted like a ritual mapped in stock pots. At the bar, guests wear tuxedos, dresses, and confident silence. Their lapel pins echo my badge symbol. I catch a fragment near the sponsor wall. Two men pretending to examine photographs speak without looking at each other. The great work ledger is heavy this quarter, one says. The other sips. They'll have to call the note. Call the note. The words land like a key in a lock. This isn't philanthropy. It's accounting. A woman with a banker's posture describes the 33rd circle to a newcomer as if she's selling an insurance rider. Founders burn fast. Circle keeps the risk from catching the rest of us. A laugh too bright, then a pivot to talk of a unicorn round that didn't implode because someone placed a call at the right moment. Nobody says lodge, nobody says mason, but the air is thick with euphemisms that don't need translating if you know the glossary. On stage, the MC thanks friends of the foundation, gestures to a slide of clinics and schoolrooms, almost all images without captions. No donor list scrolls, no applause lines for benefactors. The room claps like it's rehearsed relief. When the lights dim for a short film, I slip away along the wall, past a curtain that hides the service corridor. The air drops a few degrees. Stone replaces carpet. The music thins to a hum. A caterer pushes a rack through a steel door. I catch it with my shoulder and offer to help. He nods, grateful to not be yelled at. We descend a flight of narrow stairs that shouldn't be this old in a building turned trendy. The walls switch from drywall to dressed granite. At the landing, there's a refrigerator door that sits proud of the frame by a thumb's width. I press my palm against the gasket. Cold bleeds through. He yanks the handle. I steady the rack with my foot. When he hauls the door, the unit rocks forward on rollers, revealing a wedge of darkness lit by a single bulb far down a tiled spine. He mutters, "Always this thing," and disappears toward the banquet kitchen. I let the fridge settle just enough to slip sideways through the opening. The corridor beyond is original, tiled in small squares that fan into a compass rosette every 10 paces. The air carries incense faint as memory, resin and smoke mingled with the ghost of ledger ink. Along the wall, niches hold leather-spined ledgers stamped with maritime seals, sounder, keel, lantern reef, and dates written in a tight schoolmaster hand. One is marked Maison Consortium. I reach without thinking and stop my fingers an inch shy. This isn't rumor, it's record-keeping, bound and catalogued, shelved like reference. Voices travel. A benefactor's laugh floats down, then a murmur. We review initiates at quarters close. I snap photos fast, spine stamps, embossed seals, the rosette tiles that match the emblem's offset. A page sits ajar inside a niche. I lift, angle for light, and freeze. Names in careful script, dates, signatures with a pinprick of dried brown at the end of each. The clause language reads like legal poetry. Years for patronage. Voice to silence when called. My chest tightens. This ledger doesn't just measure money. A tray clatters above. Footfalls on stone, deliberate and close. I ease the book back and slide my phone to silent, heart beating too loud for this hallway. On the niche's lip, a small red wax wafer clings, stamped with a Roman numeral, 7th. I pry it off with my thumbnail and pocket it, without thinking why. The steps pause at the top of the stair. A light clicks. I breathe through my nose, count 3, and step deeper, where the tiles turn from rosette to star. The corridor narrows, and the hum of the gala fades to a distant vibration, like a city heard through a church floor. The tiles shift from star back to compass, each rosette worn at the same offset that haunted Craig's stream. I keep one hand on the wall. The grout is cool and faintly gritty, as if ink dust still hangs here from a century of ledgers opened and closed. Halfway down, a niche breaks the rhythm. Inside, a metal box with a milky glass face sits flush with the tile. The label is almost erased, but when I tilt my phone light, letters crawl back. AUX Frat. The same code from the elevator logs. A tiny keyhole waits like a mouth. I remember the wax wafer in my pocket. The 7th. Folly, maybe. But the rim of the keyhole has a shallow notch that matches the wafer's chip. I press the wax against it, feel the mark seat, then twist the wafer like a dial. Somewhere inside the wall, a soft relay clicks. A seam opens where no seam should be. Tiles part by half an inch. A draft breathes out, warmer than the corridor, carrying a thread of incense and something metallic. I find the edge and pull. The door behind the refrigerator had a twin. A door behind a wall that pretended to be seamless. It gives an inch, then 2, then swings enough to let a person through sideways. On the other side, darkness resolves into a low chamber with plaster vaulting and ribs painted the same foundation blue as the gala stage. Only this blue is older, chalkier, worn by fingertips. The floor here is a mosaic. A compass rose nested inside a circle of bees, their wings tessellated into a ring. The center stone is a brass disc with a hairline groove cutting it into a hinged lid. Around the circle, wall niches hold more ledgers, and above them, reliefs of ships and squares and unfamiliar tools. A plumb bob, a level, a quincunx of dots. The faint incense floats from a bronze censer shaped like a lantern, the kind sailors hung in storms. I step to the nearest ledger and ease it open. The paper is rag-thick, edges hot-pressed smooth. Inside, columns label petition, sponsorship, consideration, obligation. Under consideration, you get phrases that don't belong in a bank. Introductions secured, investors convened, investigation diverted. Under obligation, the language is exact. Silence when summoned. Service of time or influence. Voice to quiet when the work requires capacity. Each signature ends in a tiny pinprick, dried and brown. They didn't swear with hands, they signed with blood. A ledger halfway down the row bears a gilded title, Maison Consortium. I open to a marked ribbon. Craig's initials, neat, not rushed. The date matches the quarter when his company avoided collapse by a week. Consideration: bridge of liquidity at scale. Obligation: silence when summoned. Transfer in succession if work remains unmet. The last line looks faint until I turn my light at a low angle. A hidden line surfaces, written in a paler ink, almost a scratch. Debt transferable in succession. The words nick my throat. If they couldn't take what he promised, they'd take it from the one who came after him. Footfalls again, closer this time, muffled by carpet somewhere above. I shoot a dozen photos in the rhythm of a heartbeat. Spine stamps, the claw's language, the blood pricks catching light like braille. A soft percussion vibrates through the brass disc in the floor. One tap, then two, then a third in a pattern. Not random. A call and response. I don't know. There's an alcove opposite the ledgers with small shelves for objects that aren't books. A pair of leather masks hangs from pegs, each tagged with a code and a sector. EDU 03, FIAN 12. Between them, a shallow dish holds a few droplets of wax, stamped with numerals. I slide the sekovan from my pocket next to a V and a Niags, each with a different tint. Degrees, or chapters, or steps in a ritual that pretends to be bookkeeping. The room is a ledger and a chapel. I pocket the phone with shaking hands and take one last look at Craig's line. Transferable in succession. It explains his stare past the camera, the stray name on the pack filings, the clean slate candidate tethered to a ceremony calendar. This isn't myth. It's an operating manual, written in clauses and candles. A scrape on tile at the corridor's mouth turns my spine to ice. I return the ledger to its shelf and ease the door enough to erase the seam. The relay clicks again, a soft animal sound. I'm in the dark with the bees on the floor, the sensor's thread of smoke, and a heartbeat ticking in the brass disc. My hand finds the wall, my fingers settle in grooves worn by other hands that found this room, paused, decided. I take the wax seventh back because I don't know why I'll need it, only that taking it is the first decision I own in a place built on other people's promises. Then I wait for the footfalls to pass, listening to a language of taps and breaths older than the gala above, older than Craig's last words, older than my fear, which still knows exactly what it is. He stepped out of the corridor like he'd been waiting in the stone itself, not surprised, not hurried. No mask, just a retired statesman in a dark suit that didn't catch the light. He didn't reach for a radio or raise his voice. He looked at my hands, at the wall behind me, at the faint ghost of incense, and said, calm as a reading, "You've seen too much to misunderstand." I held still. He tilted his head toward the seam I'd closed. His eyes traced the grout line like a surveyor reading terrain. Then he smiled the way people smile at funerals, courtesy over grief. "The door you found doesn't exist on any plan," he said. "That keeps most people safe. It tempts the rest of us." He didn't ask my name. He said it, the way someone says a password they're already sure of. "Elias, your award was well earned. Your timing is reckless." He motioned toward the stairs. "Walk with me. If you run, someone less patient will think you're stealing context." I took one step, then another, feeling the wax wafer in my pocket like a hot coin. He led me up into the service corridor. The sound of the gala softened our edges. In the prep kitchen, steam lifted from stock pots. Knives chimed against boards. He moved through it like a regular, past chefs, past a planner tapping a tablet, into a small anteroom with wood-paneled walls and a window that faced stone. He closed the door and leaned against a shelf of spare programs. "We can do this two ways," he said. You tell me what you think you know, and I correct the dangerous parts. Or I tell you what the ledger means, and you decide if you still want to publish a headline that burns the city to make a point. I asked what they called him here. He considered, like names were tools, and he was picking the right one. Grand Master is a romantic relic, he said. In the old wording, I'm a chair. I preside so someone else can talk, but it'll do for tonight. He didn't posture. He explained. The order, as he framed it, was a risk underwriter for civilization. Not a puppet string, not a cabal that decides winners for sport. A mechanism to keep panic from gutting the whole when a part fails. We don't control founders, he said. We bet on them when the public appetite for risk pretends to be charity. We build redundancies. Introductions are our currency. Obligations pay the maintenance. I said I'd seen blood in the signatures. He nodded. It concentrates the mind. We don't ask more than anyone can give. We ask for silence when noise would wreck 100 livelihoods. My jaw tightened. He watched me see the trap. Join for protection, or be misread as a thief of context. He softened it with a memory. I read your factory exposé, he said. The Union banner downstairs was in that story. You wrote like the floor could fall out from under people. You were right. But courage without context makes rubble. He reached for a program and turned it over, drawing a small compass on the cardboard with a fountain pen. 2 degrees off true can read as a flaw if you want it to be. Or it can be a coordinate, he said. We choose coordinates. We don't drag, most of the time. We don't love quiet, he said. We love rooms that can work. He slid a page from a plastic sleeve. An anonymized petition marked unusual at the top. Petition. Introductions to 3 principles across sovereign lines. Consideration. Licenses harmonized in 90 days. Obligation. Silence when summoned. Service in succession. He didn't say Craig. He didn't have to. The handwriting had the same neatness I'd seen in the Maison volume. He looked at me then, not at the text. Unusual petitions write unusual obligations. When we accelerate someone beyond what their ballast can bear, the note that returns isn't about punishment. It's about triage. If he can't pay, the system asks who can without breaking. That's what succession means when it's used correctly. Bench strength. If there's no bench, that's failure upstream. On us. The room felt smaller. I thought of the candidate Craig had lifted, the clean slate reformer with a passee check and a calendar that suddenly synced with midnight. The Grand Master read my face and didn't soften. You're hearing coercion, hear architecture. If a city hangs on one person's mouth, the system is already bent. We try to unbend, not bend further. I pushed back. You call it architecture. The public hears coercion because you don't ask them. He nodded once. Consent is our ugliest word. We've treated it as a threshold instead of a practice. You'll write that line better than I can. He closed the manual and rested his hands on it like a lid. Then he gave me the part I didn't expect. We argue, he said, in rooms like this. Elders who think every risk is a contagion. Young ones who think chaos is medicine. We codify less than you imagine. We rely on judgment more than we should. That's why you're here. Judgment gets better when it expects daylight. I asked what daylight looks like for a covenant built on quiet. He didn't blink. It looks like knowing which obligations touch public power and writing those into laws instead of ledgers. It looks like ending clauses that bind successors who never signed. It looks like telling stories that don't turn people into monsters when systems are the problem. He finally said Craig's name. Maison's petition stretched our charter. He asked for miracles, and then asked for silence to protect people who didn't sign. We honored the second ask. The first one aged into a debt we couldn't carry without help. His petition was unusual. The way we handled it might need to end. He stood, not as dismissal, but as a hinge. You came for a conspiracy. You found a mechanism. Mechanisms can be retooled. He opened the door back to the corridor where gala music filtered in like a memory of normal life. Ask about Maison, he said, but ask it in the room where we log the masks you already noticed. Then decide what you owe the people watching your broadcast when their phones light up and their hands shake. I followed him, the wax 7th warming against my leg, the language of obligations sitting in my mouth like a coin. Moments, not dates. Service, not theater. And a clause I couldn't stop turning over. Transfer in succession. He waited until the master closed the reading room door. Then I asked for the part he kept skirting. Not the manual, the night, the petition. Craig's. He didn't reach for a new ledger. He reached for memory. Maison came here first as a guest at a breakfast, he said. He talked fast, thought faster, carried a team by sheer voltage. When the market turned, he burned hotter. 3 quarters later, he walked into this building on a rain night with shoes soaked through and a board about to cut his runway. He asked for a petition he hadn't earned yet. Petitions, he explained, aren't prayers. They're proposals with math behind them. On Craig's, the column for consideration ran long. Licenses harmonized in 90 days. 2 sovereign introductions. Bridge of liquidity at scale. It read like a wish list written at 3 a.m. by someone who'd been told no in 12 cities. Sponsors vouch. We did. We knew the stakes were larger than his cap table. Supply chains, jobs, research that shouldn't die because a founder misread a cycle. We wrote it, carefully. And then we added the counterweight. He slid a thin duplicate across the table so I could see the line without photographs. Clause 12. Silence when summoned, or the ledger claims the voice. The phrasing landed like a knuckle on wood. He watched me process it. It's not a threat, he said. It's a fuse. If panic would cost more than confession, we ask for quiet. If quiet would cost more than courage, we ask for voice. Craig signed. We all bled a pinprick. Nobody thinks they'll be called. He didn't dramatize the wins. The introductions landed. A minister took a weekend meeting and didn't slam a door. A regulator in a second country read a draft with a pen instead of a press release. The bridge money arrived while a bigger round coalesced. On the chart, it looked like timing. In the ledger, it looked like consideration delivered. Months later, the whistleblower surfaced. Subpoenas gathered like weather. A researcher Craig funded was named in a smear that would have crushed a promising clinical trial mid-phase. Private life bled into public. A custody petition threatened to turn into a stage. The master didn't blink as he said it. Craig asked to be summoned. He asked for silence to protect others, not to shield himself. That's not how people imagine debt. But the clause doesn't care about narratives. It cares about capacity. I traced the margin symbol I'd noticed in the live stream, the slight angle shift in the square and compass. He nodded before I spoke. You saw the variant. That mark wasn't a designer's whim. It was a signal to those of us who read. 2 degrees off, called silence in the room, not a PR strategy. The offset appeared on his stream because he wanted witnesses to know the call wasn't caprice. He didn't break, he complied. I said the word that kept biting, regretted. He didn't rush to defend. Regret lives in every successful petition, he said. The bargain makes sense in a storm. The sun comes out, and the price feels dear. Craig regretted the parts of his petition that bound anyone but himself. He argued against succession from the hour he learned the whistleblower's name. He said, "Let the debt end with me. If the system had more bench, it could have. That was on us." He turned the duplicate and tapped a margin glyph I'd missed, a tiny mark, like a stitch. It matched the variant emblem. That mark is used when a petitioner asks for discretion around family. It flags for elders. It doesn't override clauses. We gave him every form of silence that protected the researcher and the child. We took his voice from public life. We didn't take his breath. Those are different acts. I pressed him on the transfer. He didn't flinch. Transfer in succession is supposed to bind a function, not a person. If a board chair can't serve, a vice chair steps in. If a donor can't deliver, a sponsor covers a pledge. I asked to see the masks that corresponded to districts in the candidate's orbit. He obliged without performance, lifting Pol 04 and Tex 01 and setting them on the table. He didn't make me wear them. He didn't have to. The weight of the tags did the work. When people talk about power, they imagine crowns. We hand them labels and ask them to sit still while the work speaks. I kept a running inventory in my head, rows of function faces, a log of vows, a light shaft drawn like a ruler through stone. Theater, yes, but theater with calibration marks you could measure. I could feel the outline of how the building itself enforced a schedule older than anybody's calendar invite. He checked a watch that looked like it had lived on one wrist for decades. "You've got an hour from when I told you. You had an hour. 20 left. You can leave with your notes. You can keep your photos in your head. If you publish a page, we'll say you stole it. If you publish your impressions, we'll say you saw a private club doing weird charity. Either way, you'll land punches. The question is where." I asked if any of the masks had ever been retired for shame, not ceremony. Hung up because a function had been abused. He didn't dodge. "Media 01, he said, and touched a peg with no face on it. It was burned after a broadcaster used our phrases to hide a payoff. We wrote a clause to keep broadcasters out entirely. It held for 8 years. It didn't hold forever. He left his hand on the empty peg a beat longer than necessary. A thrum worked its way up through the floor, the same pattern I'd felt in the brass disc below. Tap, tap, pause, tap. He lifted his chin, reading the rhythm like a train timetable. Preparatory. We're between the reading and the pledge. He pointed at the hallway. "You asked to see. I've shown. My offer stands. Leave with context. Use it to keep the room from burning when you light it." I looked at the masks again. Leather faces labeled as systems and neighborhoods, waiting for people whose names would never appear in the log. The chant looped on low, the word for quiet moving in a circle that didn't end. The shaft of light drifted an inch and found the stud with a click you felt more than heard. The building aligned itself for an hour that wasn't about me. He held the door. "You've got 19 minutes now. Upstairs, they're toasting innovators. Down here, somebody's about to promise they'll treat silence as a tool, not a shield. You can believe them or not. But when you write, don't pretend you didn't hear the room's intention." Then he let the silence settle, and made room for me to choose which face I'd wear when I walked back into the night. While the building tuned itself to midnight, a phone buzzed in a cramped back office half a world away. He'd been off shift for hours, but the dashboard lived in his head. He was the Lagos mod who'd yanked Craig's clip under legal hold, who'd messaged me and then watched his admin session evaporate like breath on glass. He should have left it alone. He didn't. He'd saved a local copy before the takedown, a reflex he'd learned after one too many accidental purges. Now, he restored the file into a sandbox he trusted more than any corporate cloud. His sister knocked, balancing a bowl of jollof and a question he could see coming. "You're still on that video?" He told her it was work overflow. She didn't buy it. "Don't keep files like that on that phone," she said, tapping the case with a nail that clicked like a metronome. "You know how they fish." He ran a checksum diff against the public cache, line by line, frame by frame. The emblem overlay, the 2-degree offset I'd seen, didn't sit on top like a sticker. It woke up inside the stream itself at the first second of live. Frame 0, plain. Frame 1, variant lit, pinned to Craig's shoulder like a whisper. The activation flag matched a timestamp in the uplink, not the platform's encoder. He leaned back and swore softly. This wasn't a troll with After Effects. This was a signal injected where only someone with the keys could stand. He opened his notebook and sketched what he was seeing in the diff output. The watermark signature that resolved to a legacy clearinghouse sat in the same family as the building's elevator error code I'd found. AUX frat. 2 different worlds. 1 dialect. He screenshotted the diff with the activation byte circled, then hesitated. Forwarding that slice could burn him. Forwarding nothing could burn me. He split the difference. He encrypted a package and dropped it in a dead inbox we'd agreed on 5 years back when another story went sideways. His sister set the bowl down and lowered her voice. "They called the station asking what I post about." She ran a community arts feed with a following larger than she'd admit. "They didn't say your name. They asked if I knew anyone who handled sensitive material." He felt heat crawl up his neck. "Change your passwords," he said, "and keep the phone off at night."